there's a story in the Bible about a people group called the Gibeonites. So after King Saul had died and David was king of the Israelites, there was this famine that had gone on for like 3 years. No rain, no crops, no food. People were dying. And they kept praying and saying, God, bring us water, release us from this famine where your people are dying. And the Lord would not answer their prayers. And so finally, King David went to beseech the Lord. And God told him very clearly that the sin that Saul had committed many generations earlier against the Gibeonites was the reason why God refused to hear the Israelites' prayer for rain. That sin had to be atoned for. So David went to the Gibeonites and said, our former king, Saul, sinned against you. What can we do to make it right? What will pay for this sin? And they said, well, give us 7 of Saul's male descendants, and we're going to sacrifice them. And that will pay for the sin. And so David said, okay. And he did. So thankfully, we're under a different covenant where Jesus' blood has already atoned for our sin. But the point is that every sin demands a payment. And until it's paid for, it's out there, able to do damage to both parties. The way that we atone for sins under our covenant is by releasing Jesus' mercy where judgment is deserved. This literally translates us from a victim to being a victor. From an inferior place to a superior place. Sometimes it's really hard giving up our victim state when we've been wronged. It can actually become part of our identity. We all know people who have unconsciously made being a victim really their identity. They wouldn't know how to live not being victim. We also live in a culture that sort of celebrates being victim and thinks that there's power in the ability to accuse other people of wrongdoing. But what we need to realize is that this is really a trap that keeps us in relationship with the accuser and gives him access to torment our hearts and minds. Kind of a backfire. But this process of applying Jesus' mercy to pay for the debts that are created by sin, it allows us to take our sovereignty back. It puts us in an empowered position so that even if the person continues to commit offenses against us, we're somehow more protected because we've established a posture of mercy towards that person, though we may have to extend mercy again if there's new offenses. But if you think about like a sovereign nation, that nation controls its borders, right? It decides who comes in, who doesn't come in. If they do come in, that nation gets to decide the terms under which they are allowed to operate in that country. How long do they get to stay? What do they get to do? What do they not get to do? An injustice against us is actually an illegal entry into our sovereign being, our personhood. This process of applying Jesus' mercy to pay for those debts gives us our sovereignty back so that we can reestablish our borders, our boundaries, our sovereignty. A lot of times people think that, well, I'll just, do nothing. I'm supposed to be tough. I'll just, let it slide off my back. But doing nothing doesn't make you strong. It actually diminishes us. It diminishes our God-given dignity. So doing nothing is not a good option. This is really, truly what unoffendability is. Back in 2020, I prayed and I asked the Lord to show me. I thought it was kind of cool. Show me how to be unoffendable, Lord. I thought I was asking him to help me grow thicker skin so I would be tougher. And the Lord was like, yeah, that's not how it works. Unoffendability is really recognizing injustices quickly, naming the charge or charges against that person accurately, and bringing them to a speedy trial where I can extend mercy to pay for their offenses against me. This prevents the festering that the enemy loves to take advantage of, to dig his hooks deep into our wounds of offense. In fact, we actually don't even have the right to hold on to offenses until we're ready to release an offense. We often hear people say, well, I'm just not ready. I'm working on it. I'm just not ready. But you know what? Even the drafters of the U.S. Constitution understood this principle when they guaranteed every defendant the right to a speedy trial. Can you imagine keeping someone in jail until the victim feels that they're ready to give them a trial? This is not how we would want to be treated. And we'd be committing an injustice against them just by holding on to our grievance. We don't have the right to keep someone in bondage without giving them a speedy trial where their offenses can be dealt with quickly.